Morning, church.
Morning.
Again, my name is Pastor Andy. I'm one of the preaching pastors here for Hillside. And again, I want to start off by saying a happy Father's Day to all the dad, granddad, stepdads, and any just father figure role models in here. Happy Father's Day. To all the dads in here, we're given a massive responsibility, right? God entrusts us with his precious children, and I would just pray that we all step up to that challenge. Just two quick statistics that show the deep impact of having a father figure in your life. Children who have a strong positive bond with their fathers are 43% more likely to excel in school, even getting mostly A's. And on the flip side, children who have a positive relationship with their fathers are statistically 80% less likely to spend time in jail or have legal issues. Right, so we can't just stress the importance of father figures. And I know that oftentimes, right, Father's Day gets overlooked, and it's all about celebrating and honoring mom. But from the bottom of my heart, from one father to another.
Thank you, Pastor.
Yeah, of course. I hope that you have something other than a new pair of socks or a tie waiting for you at home. So we're going to continue our series today of John. We're going to get into John 5. This is the reading of God's Word. Verses 1 to 18. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I'm going, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed, and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now, that day was the Sabbath, so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to take up your bed." But he answered them, "The man who healed me, that man said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Take up your bed and walk'?" Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, as there was a crowd in the place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him, and this was why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is working until now, and I am working." This was why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. Amen. So the title of today's sermon is, "Do You Really Want to Be Healed?" This morning we find ourselves at the pool of Bethesda, with one of Jesus' most famous miraculous healings. Throughout his ministry, Jesus heals people through all different methods, but with this man, this invalid who's been paralyzed for 38 years, all it takes is a verbal command for him to miraculously gain use of his legs and be able to pick up his mat and walk again. But as always, there's more to this story than meets the eye, so let's dive right in. Let's start with verse 2. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Now, a colonnade was just another word for something like a porch or veranda. This was a place where many people gathered around because they believed in the miraculous healing powers of this water. Supposedly, occasionally, the waters would stir, and whoever made it into the pool first would be healed of whatever affliction that they had. But did you notice what it said in verse 3? Under these porches lay a great multitude of sick people. Now, I don't know what comes to mind for you when you picture this scene. Initially, I imagined maybe hundreds of sick, paralyzed, blind, and handicapped people gathered around this pool, but potentially it was actually much more than that. Elsewhere in the New Testament, when authors use the word multitude, it's in reference to thousands and thousands of people. Right? In Matthew 15, at the feeding of 4,000, Matthew records that there was a great multitude, but when you add women and children, this is probably closer to 8,000 or 10,000 people. And similarly, in Mark 6, when he describes the feeding of the 5,000, he also says a great multitude, but again, that only counted the men. If we think about the women and children, this might be 10 or 12,000 or even more. So if we apply that same sort of terminology in John's gospel to describe the number of sick and lame and diseased and paralyzed people who are lying around this Olympic-sized pool, it's possible that there were literally thousands and thousands of people because they believed somebody could get healed. That is a lot of sick and hurting people that Jesus sifts through and has to choose from. But in this sea of hurting people who are all looking for a healing, Jesus spots one man in particular. Amongst all of these thousands, Jesus is here for that one man. So let's take a look at this man. Verse 5 tells us, one was there, he had been an invalid for 38 years. Now, we don't know what caused his inability to walk. It doesn't tell us if it was an injury. We don't know if it was a condition that he was born with. We are told that we find a man who believes in the miraculous healing powers of this pool, and this man is firmly convinced that if he can just get into the water first, that he'll be cured. But for 38 years, for one reason or another, he has never been able to be that one. And Jesus comes upon him and notices something that's not just true of him, but true of us all. This man is a perfect example of where we all are at. Every one of us, at some point or another, has put our hope in false idols, false saviors, and false protectors that we believe can deal with the restlessness and the turmoil and the problems of life. But Jesus comes upon him, and Jesus sees him, and he sees us all in this situation. And yet, what does Jesus do? He approaches him anyway. Notice this man does not come asking for Jesus to do anything. He's too wrapped up in his own scheme of how he's going to receive healing. He doesn't go to Jesus, but Jesus comes to him. And in this exchange, we're reminded, again, of the bigger story, the bigger narrative of the whole Bible. This is not a story of man reaching up to God, but rather a story of God reaching down to man. Amen. And we read in verse 6 that when Jesus saw him lying there, he knew that he had already been a long time in that condition. And Jesus, in his omniscience, he asks him, "Do you want to be healed?" Now, at first, that may seem like a ridiculous question, right? If we went to the ER because we got hurt and the doctor said, "Do you want to get better?" It would be like, why do you think I came here in the first place? Duh, I want to get better. I could have just stayed home if I didn't. So why would Jesus ask this? Jesus is no fool. He is the omniscient, all-knowing Son of God. And verse 6 gives us a clue. It says he knew that this man had already been here a long time. So Jesus chooses to bluntly and directly confront a man who had possibly become so used to this lifestyle. Jesus is saying, are you sure you want this change? And J.A. Finley, a biblical scholar, says, in those days, for a man to be instantly healed would mean that he would actually give up a good living. Right? This man had been living off the charity and donations of people around him. He had learned to depend on others to tend to his matters because he had been helpless for 38 years. So if all of a sudden Jesus makes him whole, it changes everything for him. No more handouts, no more assistance. He'll have to be a productive member of society. He'll have to work to put food on the table. He's going to have to learn to function in society, which he's been removed from for 38 years. Now, I want to be careful here because I know that lots of people who are unhoused and they want change and they have a desire to improve their situation. But I also know that there is a large percentage of people living on the street who are there by their own choice. They have options and they have opportunities to change their situation, but they choose not to. And to them, we would ask, do you really want change? Do you really want healing? Because an unfortunate truth is that some folks, they don't want to get better. Because better represents a threat that they don't want to deal with, right? Healing, sometimes, it comes with a cost. Healing means that you have to make changes. Healing means that you can't go back to your old ways. Healing means that you have to let go. And for some, that can be a very scary thing. And oftentimes, I see this play out in relationship counseling, right? A couple will come in the midst of some terrible conflict or some devastating sin, and their marriage is holding on by a thread. But too often, they don't want to put in the deep work, the timely work of fixing the root problems of the marriage. They just want to slap some duct tape on their issues, right? They're really hoping that the pastor can just sprinkle some fairy dust on their marriage, right? And they say, okay, well, your marriage is better now because you know Jesus. Right? And oftentimes, when you tell them that in order to get better, in order to heal this relationship, you need to put your trust in Christ. You need to die to yourself. You need to humble yourself. You have to yield to Jesus. And all of a sudden, the moment you start saying, this is what it's going to cost you, you have to get rid of your pride. You have to die to yourself. You have to take up your cross. You have to crucify the flesh. Are you willing to do all those things? Because if you want to, then yes, we can sit down with your spouse. I'm totally happy to do that. We can do that together. But all of a sudden, this is where the pride comes. This is where the blame shifting comes. This is where the excuses come, and it becomes clear that they don't want to get better. All they really want is to win the argument. And so often, people don't want to be healed because they're unwilling to do what's necessary to receive that healing. This guy's been here for 38 years. And I think when Jesus comes and asks this question, do you want to be healed? Jesus is calling him out in a sense. Like deep down in your heart, do you really want this? Because let me tell you what salvation and rescue means. It's not just, I'm going to snap my fingers and everything's great. Go live however you want. If I'm coming to you, if I'm bringing salvation and rescue, it's going to change everything. The change in your physical ability, that's just the first of many changes that need to happen. Are you sure you want that? One more example that might help you guys see the truth of what Jesus is getting to. I've mentioned this several times before, but I'm a bivocational pastor. And my Monday to Friday full-time job is I'm a high school English teacher. Now, one of the classes that I'm lucky enough to teach is 10th grade honors English, right? I get the smart kids, and usually these are the kids that are real ambitious and they're smart and they want to challenge themselves, and they all have hopes of getting into like a top college eventually in a few years. So at the beginning of every school year, one of the first lectures that I give to my classes, it's kind of meant to be a wake-up call to them, a reality check for them, but it forces them to be honest with themselves about what they really want and what they're willing to do to accomplish their goals, right? So I start by asking them, who wants to go to a good college? And again, these are my honors kids, so almost all of them, they'll raise their hands. Or say, who wants to go to Harvard? Who wants to go to Stanford? Who wants to go to UCLA? Who wants to go to Berkeley, right? And all the hands, they keep shooting up, right? Because again, these are my honor students. And I ask them, how many of you guys would agree that having a smartphone is more of an obstacle than a tool that will help you accomplish this end goal? And again, most of them keep their hands up, right? And so I say, okay, are you real deal about going to your dream school in 3 years? Are you really serious about this goal? Because right now, since this is the start of 10th grade, you have a clean slate, right? All your B's and C's from the past, none of that counts. And you have every opportunity to go to whatever dream school you want. How many of you guys are willing to do what it takes to get there? And again, these are like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 15-year-old kids, right? Which means they're kind of naive and dumb and easy to corner. So I tell them, okay, cool. You're real deal about going to this great college. Go home tonight and tell your parents you want to downgrade to a dummy phone. Tell them you don't want a smartphone anymore. And immediately, The hands start going down, right? The mood of the room instantly changes. And I say, wait, what happened? I thought you wanted to go to UCLA. I thought you wanted to go to Stanford. If you're serious about this goal, why would you knowingly keep something as distracting and dangerous as a smartphone around that's in direct conflict with you accomplishing this goal? I thought you were serious, but you ain't about that life, right? In my 10 years as a teacher giving this speech, I've never had a single student take me up on this offer. Right? They say they want it, but how bad do you really want it? And unfortunately, the answer is not that bad. They don't want UCLA as much as they want to be part of the in crowd. Right? They don't want Stanford as much as they want to watch dumb little TikTok dance videos. Right? They don't want Harvard as much as they want to play games on their smartphones, and that's fine. Right? Not everyone can be a CEO. Not everyone can be a brain surgeon. But just be honest with yourself, right? Stop pretending like this is something that you really want because you don't. And the truth is that for many of us, we're the same. That this thing right here is stopping you, is stopping me from getting well. This is stopping you from reaching intimacy with God. It's stopping you from being a better parent, from being a better spouse. It's stopping you from getting better. And be honest with yourself, church. How bad do you want to change? Do you really want to be healed? Because most of us in here say that we want to grow closer with God. Right? We say we want a vibrant prayer life. We say that we want to see God do amazing things in our life. But at the end of the day, we also have a list of excuses that we're ready to drop as to why we haven't seen breakthrough. There are some of us in here that have been struggling with the same sin, addiction, obstacles for years and years and years, things that stand between us and living a life of holiness. And with our lips, we say we want change, and maybe you're even willing to pray for a few minutes, asking for change, but when the rubber meets the road, and it's time to take some real actionable steps that will make you sacrifice, that'll make you go without, that'll make you uncomfortable, we start singing a different tune real fast. And the floodgate of excuses start pouring in. And please believe me, church, I'm not here to judge. I'm guilty of these things too. I know how it goes. There's a lot of different reasons why we don't take these bold steps that might result in real, meaningful change and transformation. Maybe you're trying to fix yourself. Maybe you don't really believe that God can fix you. Maybe you don't want to walk away from the sinful pleasures of the flesh. Maybe your sin has been with you for so long that you're afraid of what life would look like without it. But whatever it is, we can talk the talk. But we're just like the man in the story, and deep down, really deep down, oftentimes we won't walk that walk. So Jesus is asking you the same question this morning. Do you want to get well? Do you really want to be healed? Maybe your heart has been hardened, and you know you're in crisis. You know that none of this stuff is good for you, that you need help, but at the end of the day, you're not willing to make these changes. And if that is your true heart this morning, let me propose that God may respond to that by saying, well, if you're not willing to change in your heart of hearts, if you don't really want to change, then I'm not going to change you. If you don't want to come, I'm not going to drag you. If you don't want to bend the knee, I'm not going to force you. The Bible says that all of us will bow our knee to Jesus eventually, that every knee will bow, that every tongue will confess that he is Lord, some by faith and some by regret. The choice is yours this morning, church. Let's go to verse 7. The man's response. The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water stirred up, but while I'm going, another steps down before me." Now, for starters, let me point out here that the man doesn't even answer the question that Jesus asked. Right? If you had a disease for 40 years and you went to a doctor and you said, hey, scientists have just found a cure, do you want it? We would emphatically say yes. Absolutely, yes. Can I have it? How soon can you get it to me? Is it here? Is it in the other room? Can I get it right now? How long do I have to wait? Yes, give me this cure right now. But Jesus asked him, do you want to be healed? And he doesn't even directly answer his question. Instead, the man responds by saying, I'd love for you to help me get into the water. In other words, whoever you are, sir, right? Because he doesn't even know that this is Jesus. Whoever you are, sir, I'd be happy to partner with you to get me into the water because that's what's going to save me. He's not looking at Jesus and saying, you are my salvation. He's saying, please help me get salvation. And that's the second issue with how this man responds. And again, here's the big idea. Like most of us here, there are some things in my own life that I would like to see change and growth in. But I found that most of us, we love the idea of God changing our circumstances a lot more than the idea of God changing our character. You see, people ask for prayer all the time, right? People say, Pastor, I need a breakthrough in my relationship because my husband's acting crazy. Pastor, please pray for me. I need a breakthrough with my child because they're out of control. Pastor, I hate my job and I need God to open doors for me. And those are things that I will gladly pray for on people's behalf. But you know what is oftentimes missing from the list of prayer requests? I rarely hear people say, Pastor, I'm so selfish. Can you pray God to sanctify me? Pastor, I have a terrible temper. Can you pray for God to change my heart? Pastor, I have a habit of lying and cheating to get ahead at work. Can you pray for God to deal with my sin? Because it starts here, right? Not just in your circumstances, but in your heart, in your character. You want to see real transformation. Don't just pray for new circumstances, pray for a new heart. Amen. Lord, do a new work in me. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a right spirit with me. Don't just look to Jesus to provide a way because he is the way. Right? Don't just look to Jesus to give you truths because he is the truth. Don't just look to Jesus to change your life. He is the life. But instead, the man just says to Jesus, man, if you could just help me get into this water, everything would be fixed. And look at how Jesus responds. Jesus basically says, I'm not taking you down in the water. I am the water. He gives the man 3 commands. Get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And at once, instantaneously, the man is cured. He picked up his mat and walks away. This is grace. This is gospel. This is the essence of salvation. Right? I couldn't get to the water, so the water came to me. Do you know where breakthrough begins? It begins where my excuses end. I don't have anybody. I don't know enough. I've been this way for a long time, Lord. And Jesus steps over his excuses and gives a command. And while we're busy trying to convince God to fix our problems, Jesus has a very different view of what needs to happen next in our lives for change to occur. Real change, deep change, lasting change, sustainable change. The next part of our story tells us that now it was the Sabbath day. Now, if you think about it, Jesus could have performed this miracle any day, right? He could have waited for a Monday because after all, this disabled man, he didn't have a terminal illness. He had a chronic issue. He's been waiting for 38 years to be well. Surely 38 years in one day is not going to make a significant difference. And the reality is that Jesus could have healed him 3 days later or 2 days earlier, but he intentionally picks the Sabbath for the purpose of creating a confrontation with the Pharisees. Jesus is he's looking to pick a fight, right? Jesus, he paid no attention to the traditions of the Pharisees, and when he tells the man to pick up his bed and walk, Jesus knows he's defying the Jewish leaders that are always around watching him. He has no interest in rabbinic tradition, only the law of the true and living God. He knows that the Pharisees, have substituted the traditions of men for the law of God, and he knows the Sabbath is a means to glorify God and to honor God. It's supposed to be a gift to mankind. But they've turned it into a burden and a way in which they can demonstrate their own false righteousness. The Pharisees see this man who was hopelessly paralyzed, a man who they've witnessed for 38 years by the pool. And instead of responding to the miracle of his healing with joy and celebration, they interrogate him. Why are you carrying your bed? Right? They couldn't care less that this miracle had been given from God. How wicked and deceitful is the human heart that they're more concerned with his disobedience of rabbinic tradition than they were excited to his astonishing healing and relief from suffering. No wonder that Jesus gives a verbal beatdown later in Matthew 23. He says of the Pharisees, right, just a quick list, everything that you do is for people to see. They put loads on people's shoulders and are not willing to lift a finger to move them. They love the place of honor and the most important seats. He calls them false teachers, blind fools, whitewashed tombs, hypocrites, snakes, broods of viper. The Jewish leaders were so obsessed with the do's and don'ts of their religion that they totally missed the Messiah. Come on. And if we look at the man's response to the Pharisees' accusations, right? If that were you that Jesus healed, how would you respond? Right? I'd be jumping up and down, right? Praising Jesus, thanking Jesus, showing Jesus your gratitude in any way. That would be an appropriate way to respond to being healed after 38 years. But this man doesn't do that. In fact, he demonstrates an incredibly ungrateful attitude. Right? Because in comparison, later in the book of John, we see a similar story with a man who was born blind. When Jesus healed him, he can't keep the news to himself. He goes immediately to tell people of what Jesus did. And we've already seen the encounter that Jesus had with the woman in the well that Pastor David talked about, right? The first evangelist. When Jesus reveals himself to her, she runs into town and tells everyone that she's just met the Messiah. She can't wait to bear witness to the greatness of Christ. How about this guy? Right? The Pharisees and leaders come to him. It's the Sabbath. It's not lawful for you to carry your bed. And what does he say? Does he say, I'm so happy that I want to just throw this bed in the air and skip and leap all the way home praising God? Absolutely not. The man says, well, he who made me well said to me, take up your bed and walk. In essence, he's saying, it wasn't my idea, right? If someone comes along and tells me to walk, and I walk for the first time in 38 years, and he tells me to pick up my bed and carry it, well, what else do you think I'm going to do? If you have a problem with it, why don't you go talk to him? And we see this sort of attitude way back in the book of Genesis. Remember, God comes to Adam and says, why did you eat the fruit? What does Adam do? She made me do it. So he goes to Eve. Why did you give your husband the fruit? What does she do? The serpent made me do it. And thousands of years later, we're still trying to pass the buck. We're still trying to blame shift when it comes to the sin in our lives. And when Jesus comes in verse 14 and he sees this man again, he tells him, see, you are well again. Stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. Now, we're not entirely sure what Jesus means here. And I want to be careful because there are many cases where physical afflictions have nothing to do with a person's sin. Right? That's very clear from what Jesus says about the blind man later in John 9. However, some of our physical afflictions are because of our sin. And it appears that this may be the case with this man here in John 5. That maybe his paralysis was the result of some sort of sin in his life. So Jesus warns him that if you don't stop, something even worse than paralysis may happen, maybe referring to hell. The other option is that Jesus could have simply been exhorting this man towards worship and devotion rather than a lifestyle of sin. Right? Maybe he's saying, look, buddy, you're healed now. Don't use your healing to go do your own thing and live your own life. You were healed for better things. not for worse things. I didn't just want to help you in the body. I want you to believe. I want you to be spiritually and completely healed, not just physically healed. But there's no indication that the man responds to Jesus in this way. Because after Jesus calls him out in verse 14, we can see that his heart hasn't changed. And the words of Jesus haven't really landed, because look what he does next. He goes away and he goes out of his way to find the Pharisees again to snitch on Jesus, to rat out Jesus, right? He leaves the presence of Christ and he goes back to the Pharisees to give them more intel that they would use to build a case against Christ. Eventually, the Pharisees would confront Jesus and they say, "You're healing and doing things on the Sabbath." And what does Jesus say? He says, "My Father is working until now, and I'm working." Now, here's what's going on. The rabbis, they all taught that, again, the only person who can work on the Sabbath without sinning was God. And they try and confront Jesus with that. And Jesus, he says, "Okay. And?" Right? The Pharisees are like, no, you don't get it, Jesus. The only person that can work on Sabbath is God. And Jesus is like, "You are absolutely right. Hold my communion wine. Let me get to it." Right? My Father and I are doing our work. And they immediately knew what Jesus was saying. Right? I'm not sure you and I would the first time, but verse 18 makes it very clear. They immediately knew he was saying he was God. Yes. And he's saying, I'm only doing the work that God does. Jesus has a plan that goes completely against the narrative of what the Pharisees had in mind. Jesus has a plan that requires the Pharisees just to throw everything that they thought was correct out the window. Jesus has a plan that challenges everything that the Pharisees believed about how to please and obey God. And instead of responding with humility, they respond by seeking to kill Jesus. How will you respond today, church? Do you really want to be healed? Jesus is the way. He doesn't just have a way, he is the way. Are you following Christ to get a reward, or do you believe that Christ is the ultimate reward? Because the world tells us, religion tells us, our sinful hearts tell us that we need to work for our salvation. That God will love us more if we obey, that we'll be worthy of Christ's love and we can earn our salvation through what we do. And each time we fall back on this false narrative, we show just how similar we are to the Pharisees. Jesus did not come to fulfill the law. He came to redefine it. And it is through his blood that a new covenant is made. It is through his death that we're redeemed. And through knowing him and following him is where we can receive healing. Not just healing of your physical wounds, but healing of your much deeper emotional and spiritual ones. And there's just one question that remains. Do you really want to be healed, church? Before you answer, I would challenge you to count the cost. Restoration comes with a price. Following Jesus comes with a price. You'll have to turn your back on your old life. The old is gone and the new has come. Healing comes with a new identity. And it comes with God's sometimes painful process of sanctification, of making you holy and being set apart. But I promise that you will get it back infinitely more than what you ever hoped for. Do you want to be healed? The pool of Bethesda was a place where a great multitude came looking for mercy. They wanted God to be merciful upon their sickness, upon their disease, upon their calamity. And God sends Jesus to one man. He was waiting for the water to move. He was waiting for God to send a man to help him climb into the pool. But God does so much more than that. Instead, the Father sends Jesus to solve the issues in his life, not just physically, but spiritually. And similarly, this morning, Hillside is a place where many of you have come this morning looking for God to intervene. A lot of you are awaiting help from a man, seeking help from a human, And while God certainly can use people to help, your true help comes from God and God alone. Christ alone has the power. Christ alone has the wisdom. Christ alone has the knowledge. He alone has the insight to give you the exact help that you need, even when you don't know what kind of help it is that you need. God is faithful. I want to invite the worship team up, and I want to invite you guys to a time of reflection. If you could bow your heads with me. I'd like you to ask and consider, do I really want to be well? How badly do I want Jesus? How badly do I want to live a life that honors and glorifies God?